Fellow primates, I don't want to make this video so much as I feel like I have to. The reason I don't want to is because the video to which I'm going to be responding has already been responded to by quite a few YouTubers that I respect, like Vernaculus, Skeptor, and Chris Raygun. But I feel like I have to make the video because regardless of how amazing their responses were, and they were really good, I'll link them in the description, I feel like I have to get off my chest the anger and frustration that I have for the ideas that this woman espouses. And I don't think I'm going to be able to avoid just basically shouting into my microphone during this response video. Because not only do I vehemently disagree with the ideas that this woman is espousing, but I also kind of want to punch her in the face. Now, I would never do that because I don't believe in hitting anyone unless they attack me first, unless it's in self-defense. And that's regardless of gender or even species. But as I've expressed in my previous response video, sometimes I really feel like violently attacking people. And I wouldn't. I'm just saying that I feel like doing that. I feel the desire. I'm not going to actually do it. Don't worry. And it's funny because I believe this is a clip from a show on MTV, which I believe Lacey Green has a show on MTV. And in Chris Raygun's response to this, he made the point that MTV has gotten away from what it once was, being a channel for music videos and basically focused on music, and it seems now to be focused on feminism and social justice in what I would argue is propaganda, but maybe it's just that I disagree with it. I mean, everyone's got a right to their opinion, right? And obviously different viewpoints are going to have platforms that they use to espouse those opinions. But let's get into this video and see what her arguments are and why I disagree with them.
Is PC culture destroying freedom of speech?
In a word, yes! Telling people what they can and cannot say is by definition antithetical to freedom of speech. But of course, you're going to say that you don't think that.
Nope.
Wrong. Now let's skip your bullshit animated intro and get to the point.
From YouTube comments to presidential candidates, it seems a lot of people think freedom of speech is under attack. And who, might I ask, is to blame? The god PC culture.
Ugh, there's one of those facial expressions that really makes me want to punch this woman. Yes, the PC culture, if you want to call it that, is going after freedom of speech. That is why South Park had such an easy time making great satire this past season with the introduction of the character of PC Principal and the basic overarching story about advertising and PC culture getting together to kind of, in an Orwellian way, censor freedom of speech and go after certain people and certain groups. It's an animated comedy show, and it's been doing a brilliant job of dissecting the problems with things like your ideology, for example. And I don't think it's too crazy to assume that you are of the social justice ideology. I mean, the ideas you are espousing in this video are consistent with that. So you may or may not call yourself a social justice warrior, but the opinions that you're espousing are consistent with that. But let's continue.
If you've ever called out racism, sexism, ableism, or any other oppressivism, you've probably been accused of being too PC.
It's funny you should say that, because I and a number of the YouTubers that I listen to and respect have spent quite a great deal of time calling out an oppressive ism, and not a single one of us has ever been accused of being too politically correct for doing so. Can you guess what that ism might be? I'll give you a hint. It starts with femin. And there are exceptions as to what is and is not politically correct with regards to the things that you've mentioned. For example, you probably would take issue with something being said that could even be perceived as sexist against women, but you probably wouldn't have the same problem with things that are said that are blatantly sexist against men. Much in the same way, you probably wouldn't have as much of an issue with things that are racist against white people as you would with things that are racist against black people. And I think the reason for this is this bullshit notion that it's only sexism if it's prejudice plus power. And it's only racism if it's prejudice plus power. And, you know, this power is something that's basically just asserted that white people have and that men have over black people and women, respectively. And it's just asserted without any kind of proof. And it's made out to be that, well, that's what racism is, and that's what sexism is, and it's much worse than just the prejudice itself, because there's some kind of power structure behind it. All the while, there's no proof that this power structure even exists. So no, in my opinion, the prejudice of racism, or the prejudice of sexism, which is all it is, no power structure required, by the way, regardless of who you're being racist against or who you're being sexist against, whether it's against women or against men, whether it's against people of color or white people, you're wrong. No matter what direction it goes in, it's not reverse racism, it's not reverse sexism, it's just racism or it's just sexism. And in any case, that racism and that sexism is wrong. But enough of my tirade. Let's continue with your video.
PC is, of course, short for politically correct.
No shit, Sherlock.
Political correctness is avoiding words or behaviors that exclude, marginalize, or insult groups of people who are socially disadvantaged or discriminated against.
Whoa, that was a whole mouthful of buzzwords. And I'm sure in no way did that describe self-censorship at the very least, if not what I was saying before about telling people what they can and cannot say so as to not insult groups that are marginalized or socially disadvantaged. And do you have any evidence or anything to back up that they are? Because otherwise, it's just an assertion.
Basically, treating people with respect.
Okay, while I understand that you should treat everybody with some basic level of respect, like not actually punching them when their face really makes you want to, true respect is earned, not given. So if you want me to say that I respect you as a person, or if you want me to respect your ideas and your opinions, not just your right to have them, then you're going to have to earn it. And those ideas are going to have to be good ones that can stand up to scrutiny.
Now, if you ask me, that doesn't sound like a bad thing. But a recent poll by Fairleigh Dickinson University found that 68% of Americans and 81% of Republicans agreed that a big problem this country has is being politically correct. Even 62% of Democrats polled agreed that being PC was getting out of hand.
So, if you affiliate yourself with either of the two major political parties, the majority of that party thinks that PC is a problem. And I don't give a shit if more Republicans think that it's a problem than Democrats. After all, it seems to be the far left that is pushing this PC agenda. And even though I generally consider myself more liberal than conservative, sometimes conservatives are actually right about something. And when they're right, I have to give them credit. And when liberals are wrong about something, I have to call them out on it. Because I don't directly affiliate myself with the Democratic Party. That's just the way I tend to lean. I call out bullshit where and when I see it.
For these folks, political correctness is synonymous with weakness or being overly sensitive.
Presuming to know what people are thinking? Straw man much? And to me, political correctness is not synonymous with necessarily being weak. It certainly is something that generally means being too sensitive, but to me, it's more synonymous with language policing and censorship.
Similar to the new term social justice warrior, calling someone PC is a way to derail and dismiss conversations about inequality.
You mean like demonizing the term MRA? Or calling someone a racist? Or a misogynist? Yeah, feminists and social justice warriors totally don't do that.
Okay, PC police, you're just offended by everything. The term PC is almost always used as an insult. While it's been around for a while, it gained popularity in the 80s when it caught on with conservatives, not liberals.
I don't give a flying fuck who it caught on with. Freedom is more important than feelings.
So why is being PC used as an insult? And what, if anything, does it have to do with free speech?
That's very simple, actually. It relates to freedom of speech because political correctness looks to avoid certain words and replace them with newspeak, as Orwell called it. And that's an insult because if you're the one doing that, then chances are it's because you're a fucking pussy who can't handle words. They're just fucking words.
Here's the thing. It's not just about hurt feelings. It's about calling out oppressive power structures, and that's where the misunderstanding comes in.
Okay, so start by proving that these oppressive power structures even fucking exist. Because if you can't, you're just fucking with everybody else's freedom of speech based on unsupported assertions. And even if they did exist, what's a fucking word gonna do to further that power structure or further the oppression? And with regards to feelings, fuck your feelings. Fuck my feelings. Fuck everyone's feelings. Feelings don't matter.
What's perceived as being too sensitive is usually someone speaking out against lazy, offensive language that doesn't usually get challenged. That's because the group of people that those words hurt historically haven't had the opportunities to have their voices heard.
Says the black woman currently whinging about oppression on her own fucking television show. I find your lack of self-awareness disturbing.
And the people who call that being too PC are often in privileged positions and don't want to or haven't had to think about what they're saying, or the consequences that come with it.
And again, with these assertions of privilege that you can't prove and don't seem to want to. Sure, white men are the fucking most expendable demographic on the planet. No one gives a fuck how many of them die in war or whatever, except on an individual level with their own personal friends and family and whatnot. But, oh, forget about that. That goes against your narrative. Because they're just fucking privileged and they never had to think about the consequences of their actions or their words, and, you know, they just sat in a fucking ivory tower all throughout history. Fuck your assertions. And if you want me to take them seriously, back them up.
You can't take away my freedom of speech just because you're offended.
Ding, ding, ding.
Well, yeah. In America, freedom of speech simply means the government cannot prohibit you from expressing yourself. It's why you can criticize Obama without being thrown in jail.
Actually, I think it was Skeptor who made a pretty good point about this. Unfortunately, there are some limits to freedom of speech. Some of them are not quite as understandable as others. For example, there are laws against hate speech, which I disagree with. I think that you should be allowed to be as fucking bigoted as you want to be. But there are also things like speech that is designed to create chaos, like shouting fire in a crowded building. Things like that, and things that are directly meant to incite violence, which could be subjective, but I think sometimes there's an example of something that's pretty clear that it's meant to incite violence, like, you know, explicitly telling people to commit acts of terrorism. But again, I think that freedom of speech should be protected in most cases. Some very rare exceptions, like making threats or specifically and explicitly wanting to incite violence, and the aforementioned example of shouting fire in a crowded building, because that creates disorder and chaos.
But on an interpersonal level, freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences. Technically, no subject on Earth is off limits. You can say whatever you want, but in turn, people are allowed to respond however they want. The fact that you can comment means you're not being censored. If you tell a crappy sexist joke and someone says, "Hey, that was a crappy sexist joke," that's freedom of speech. And if you post some racist bullshit on Facebook and your boss decides she doesn't want to employ people who spew racist bullshit on Facebook, you still have freedom of speech. And you're free to take that racist bullshit somewhere else.
Okay, that was the section of the video that I most closely, almost, kinda, sorta agree with. I believe that freedom of speech extends to everybody, and everybody has the right to respond to everyone else's freedom of speech. And I believe that no matter how bigoted you are, you still have that right. However, towards the end there, I start to disagree, because I don't think that it should be legal to fire someone, to terminate them from their employment because of something that they said on their own personal time, in their own personal medium like social media, or on their Facebook page or on their YouTube channel. Because when someone is on their own personal social media, they are not acting as a representative of the company that they happen to work for. Like, I could understand if in some kind of advertising, someone who's working as a spokesperson for a company decided to slip in some of their own personal views. Like if someone who's running a company's Twitter, works in some of their personal views, which, why do corporations have Twitter? Anyway, something like that I could understand, because then it's like you're supposed to be acting as a representative of the company, but you said something that was your own personal views that the company may not agree with. So that I could at least understand if you're acting as a representative of the company. But other than that, I think you should be able to say whatever you want on your own personal time on your YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media you want to use. But there are feminists and social justice warriors that will go out of their way to contact someone's employer and to basically try to get them fired for something on social media that they simply disagree with. For example, there was that guy in Canada who was charged, and I believe he was banned from having an internet connection for 3 years because he disagreed with feminists online, and they had said that they were afraid because he had disagreed with them so many times. Like, fear is subjective. Like, you could be afraid of ketchup, for fuck's sake. That doesn't mean ketchup is actually trying to kill you. You know what I mean? And there was also Thunderfoot. Like, there was the whole drama on YouTube with, I believe it was Jenny McDermott and Laughing Witch and Bewildered Ape, who, by the way, not a very good representative of apes, in my opinion. Fucking asshole, you're making us all look bad. Anyway, they tried to get Thunderfoot fired from his job, and at one point I think they thought they had succeeded, but they didn't, which is kind of funny to me. So yeah, that sort of thing could be abused, but I think if it's handled right in terms of the legal wording of it, I think it can be okay in some rare instances to fire someone for misrepresenting the company that they work for in a specific post or whatever that is supposed to be representing the company as opposed to just a personal post. But I think I've rambled on long enough. Let's get back to the video.
America. PC culture, treating others with respect, social justice warriors, whatever you call it, isn't prohibiting anyone's freedom of speech. It's mainly about people standing up for themselves and asking to be spoken to and spoken about in a respectful way.
Again, That's arguable, and again, respect is earned, not given.
In fact, political correctness is expanding free speech. We're adding words to the dictionary every year in an effort to promote more inclusive and respectful speech.
And again, that's what Orwell called newspeak. But just wait till we get to the list of words she's going to give, because I might have a meltdown.
Last year alone, the OED added microaggressions, mansplain, and a whole host of gender terms like cisgender, agender, and gender fluid to the dictionary. That seems like giving more speech to more people, not less.
Okay, let's take down every single one of these fucking bullshit buzzwords one by one. First off, microaggressions. Now, I basically already did a whole video about microaggressions, link in the description, though it was my first ever response video, so it might not be very good. But basically what microaggressions are little tiny fucking trivial things that don't matter in the slightest that certain people decide are fucking hugely offensive and part of the problem. Second is perhaps the worst, mansplain. Now, I've already made a reference to why I hate this fucking word and this sort of trend of putting supposedly privileged groups in front of the word splain. Well, it's not really a word. It's a part of the word explain. And then just expecting that that's a term for, some horribly oppressive act of a white person or a cis person, I'll get to that in a minute, or a man explaining to a so-called marginalized group why they're so much better or whatever. The point is that this could be so broadly applied that mansplain is like a derogatory term for something that could be so simple as a man simply speaking to a woman in any way that woman does not completely and utterly approve of. It is not some evil fucking patriarchal oppressive thing to verbally fucking talk to someone. And if they don't seem to be understanding something, or they are expressing things that you disagree with, it's not mansplaining, it's fucking talking. And I would say that in some scenarios, what you might call mansplaining is a necessary act to prevent someone from doing something really fucking stupid. So enough about that bullshit. On to the other ones regarding gender. We have cisgender, agender, and gender fluid. Well, I might get in trouble for this one, but fuck it. Cisgender is just inventing a term for normal. I am sorry, transgender people. I don't have anything against you. But the thing is, gender dysphoria is a disorder. And it is something that needs to be treated one way or the other. Now, the two ways you treat that is either change the body to match the mind, or change the mind to match the body. Now, technology might not be as such to where we can really fix people's brains to match their body when they have gender dysphoria, but we can at least provide hormone therapy and provide surgical procedures to change the body to match the brain. But when the body and the brain match with regards to biological sex and gender identity, that's the norm. That's like 99% of the time. So to come up with a special term for that just seems kind of unnecessary to me. And it almost seems like a way to create a term where you can demonize people just for being normal, just for having their brain match their body. And I don't think it's fair to do that, to demonize people for the way they were born. I would say that's an awful lot like racism or sexism. And then we have agender, which is, I guess, without gender, someone who doesn't consider themselves to be male or female, and gender fluid, someone who feels that their gender is, not a solid one or the other, but it could go either way, or it could be, a potato or something. The problem that I have with these is that while gender identity can be kind of a gray area, biological sex is not. You either have a Y chromosome or you don't. And I talked about this more in my Double Your Stupid, Double Your Dumb video. I'm going to have to put so many videos in this description, but I'll link it in the description. The point is that, in my opinion, gender identity is just one way or the other. And gender dysphoria means that your brain is that of a female when you were born male, or it's that of a male when you were born female. And gender dysphoria or transgenderism is wanting to fix that, wanting to change your body to match your brain. However, I do not think it is necessarily a real thing. I'm not convinced that it's a real thing to consider yourself without gender, or that you're in some kind of nebulous state where you could consider yourself male or female depending on how you're feeling that day. I'm not convinced that that's a real thing. That's really all I'm saying. I would need to see some scientific evidence, some kind of scientific study to convince me that this is a real thing and not just, a fucking mental disorder or something. Or maybe just a cry for attention. And as a quick side note, I would like to second Chris Raygun's motion to make a new word called womanplain. That is a combination of the words woman and complain. Because as Chris Raygun pointed out in his response video, that happens a lot. And in fact, it's happening in the very video that he was responding to and that I'm currently responding to. What a coincidence.
So have you ever been accused of being too PC?
Like I told you before, I have never been accused of being too politically correct. You fucking cunt.
Or maybe you've been thrown in jail for saying the N-word. How do you still have internet access?
I honestly don't know if you're exaggerating, but that would kind of go against your narrative, wouldn't it? I mean, if someone got thrown in jail just for saying a word, wouldn't that be political correctness stomping all over someone's freedom of speech and taking that freedom away from them? And it's funny you mentioned the internet access thing because, like I said, there was that guy in Canada who lost internet access for, I think it was 3 years, because he disagreed with feminists on the internet.
Tell us about it in the comments below, and we'll see you next week right here.
Excellent idea! Comment on my video. Subscribe to my channel. Like this video if you liked it. Dislike it if you think I'm some kind of evil, oppressive, patriarchal shitlord, and probably a racist. And I'll catch you on the next video. Stay great, apes.